Caroline Paris is an interdisciplinary PhD student at the University of Maine and a lecturer in local food and agritourism at the University of Southern Maine. A first-generation American, she is proud to call Maine her home since 1993. Over the last 3 decades, Caroline has pursued 2 distinct careers. First, as an educator who helped teachers create service learning opportunities for K through 12 students, and second, as a regional planner who engaged cities and towns in economic community development. Her third career was born on a trip to Italy where she traveled to Bologna to learn how the distinct products of Parma are made. Inspired by the farm-to-table culture, she is now pursuing a self-designed PhD to explore the role of agritourism in transforming visitors into lifelong consumers of Maine farm and fish products. In addition, she runs her own consultancy, Periscope, focused on market research and grant writing to support local economies. You and Imani should talk. Caroline earned her BA in political science and communication from the University of California at San Diego, as well as a second BA in tourism and hospitality at the University of Southern Maine. Her spirit food is gnocchi, a love born from her parents' home of Argentina, where the 29th of every month is celebrated as El Día Nacional del Gnocchi. Welcome, Caroline.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I do want to give a big thank you to the 11 o'clock panel for creating such a welcoming and inclusive atmosphere. I am also an underrepresented demographic in agriculture and fisheries, a first-generation American from Argentina, and I didn't grow up in a farming or fishing family, so my street cred here is as a local food consumer. My father grew up in a family of 13 in a 2-room apartment in Buenos Aires, and I'm sure he didn't eat lobster as a child. However, by the time I was born in the 70s, he had the means to take us out to dinner a couple times a year to Sam's Seafood, where one person would order the lobster. That was all we could afford. But we knew back then, way before Instagram, way before TikTok, that Maine lobster was special. So about 7 years ago, I had the most extraordinary experience in Damariscotta, Maine. Who is familiar with Damariscotta on Maine's mid-coast? Many of you, great. So we waddled down to the dock, we breathed in the salty air, we squeezed ourselves into a kayak and got launched into the river. I remember the sunlight was dancing on the water. And we learned that Maine oysters make the water cleaner for all species. After some instruction, we learned to cradle the oyster in the palm of our hands and feel the rough edges and shuck it open and slurp it right there on the water. And now every time that I see Maine oysters on a menu in the US or around the world, I think back to that day. And I want to order them. And that's really the magic of experience that I'm going to talk about today. So a different kind of storytelling. And what would it mean to multiply that single experience by the millions of people who visit Maine? All right, but first we have some challenges. The US does import 80% of its seafood, of all the seafood consumed in the US. And that amounts to about $20 billion. On top of that, the seafood produced in the Gulf of Maine is pretty much a mismatch for the national consumer preferences for salmon, shrimp, and canned tuna, which are largely not produced here. And yet, Maine's 16 million visitors come here to enjoy our working waterfronts, to eat our seafood, and to soak in the scenic views. So how can we bridge this gap between supply and demand for consumers?
Oh, these look good. It takes roughly 2 years to get this oyster to market, and so any opportunity we have to share 2 years of labor with somebody, we quite enjoy that.
Ben Hamilton owns Love Point Oysters, one of some 150 oyster farms dotting the Maine coast, and one of the dozens that are now part of the Maine Oyster Trail.
The Maine Oyster Trail really makes it easy for consumers to find Maine oysters, plan their own Maine oyster adventure, and really get out there on the farms, and that's really what we're all about.
Among the array of experiences, guided oyster farm tours. Tour boats, including the Pamela B out of Freeport, will shuttle guests out for an up-close look at exactly how Maine oysters are farmed.
Interacting with people like in the environment where we work, as opposed to a raw bar or an event, is a really special, unique experience.
You get people on the water, you educate them about what aquaculture really means, what it really looks like, and they get to eat oysters, and they get to see it up close and personal and check out oyster farming.
Good stuff.
It's extremely hard to get a commercial lobster license. Right now, the wait list to get a commercial license is about 15 years. Over! We want to make sure that we are sustaining our industry. Caitlin Knight, we are at Rocky Bottom Fisheries. So squeeze it together like you're going to clap your hands. Everybody comes to Maine for lobsters. Perfect. Oh, you got it, you got it, you got it. But they don't always know what's behind the scenes. So you just put a band on what's called the pincher claw. We've had people from Pull Up Tight all over the world visiting us. Nice. And they learn so much. Nice job. We talk about regulations, how to measure our lobsters, how to hold the lobsters. Slide our other hand. There's a lot of people that work in this industry, and it's generational. So we want to make sure that we are sustaining our industry so that those generations can continue to fish. And when I hear people go, oh my gosh, that's so cool, you know that you're really bringing something to the table that they came here to learn about. It's a really great feeling.
All right, so raise your hand if you've had an experience like this on the water. Okay, some of you. All right, for those of you who hadn't, it's still summer in Maine, and you can still get outside on the water. There are about 50 oyster farms that welcome visitors for tours like that. There's also about 10 to 20 lobstermen who offer lobster boat tours. So this type of experience is more traditionally known as agritourism, which encompasses direct sales, education, entertainment and events, outdoor recreation, and lodging. But to find out how these experiences have been applied to fisheries, I conducted about I would say a 2 to 3 year research project, both here at USM and the University of Maine, interviewing a couple dozen industry representatives, including oyster farmers and lobstermen. So that was the supply side for these experiences. And then also looking at the demand side in terms of how do consumers feel about these experiences and what do they remember the most and how does it influence their values towards seafood? Well, first, we found that fishermen participate in aquatourism for many of the same reasons that motivate farmers to do it. And the first reason being diversifying income. So participating in one of these experiences goes for about $50 to $75 a person, so it is pretty expensive, but it really offers fishermen, again, that chance to diversify their income, and they can also make direct sales on the dock, in some cases, to visitors who participate in these experiences. A second reason, really important, is to educate consumers. Aquatourism offers producers the opportunity to talk about the sustainability of the fishery. A third reason is to attract new customers. Maine has 1.4 million residents, but 16 million visitors a year, about 80% of whom come back for a repeat visit. Most of them are from the Northeast. So if you think about that bigger consumer market for Maine seafood products, it's much bigger than just the people who live here. Another reason is to promote the brand of the industry, what one producer does. And I think you heard there's at least 5,000 fishermen in Maine, 7,000 farmers, about 200 farms participate in agritourism, and less than 100 fishermen. So those are sort of the stats. But what one fisherman does, or an intermediary, as the boat operator would be considered an intermediary, really acts as a rising tide, creating awareness of the entire industry, and not just for that one producer. It's also an opportunity for producers to share their culture, their pride, and their heritage. That's Sadie Samuels from the Mid-Coast. She followed in her father's footsteps as a lobsterman. She left the state, but came back. And she has her own twist on being a fisherman, not just the fishing, but she has her own food service operation and her own retail store, which gives her lots of opportunities to connect with visitors and consumers. And then promoting rural economic development is another key part, whether it's the business-to-business spending, or it's job creation for family and friends, or building infrastructure that supports the working waterfront. All right, so quickly to the demand side in terms of how do consumers connect with these experiences? So I basically analyzed the stories of about 800 different participants of working waterfronts and asked them, what do you remember about the experience? And came up with this, what I call the 4 Ps of agritourism and aquatourism: participation, place, people, and product. And the most powerful of these, maybe no surprise, is participation. So this is an opportunity for the producer to co-create an experience with a visitor. Every experience is different, whether you're boating out to a farm or you are learning to shuck oysters. That is a level of engagement where stuff can happen. Another important piece, if you think about a winery and you buy that bottle of wine and you open it up 6 months or 6 years later, that's not always possible with seafood. But, right, there is branded merchandise, there is swag, and then for some who are maybe staying a little longer, they can get that lobster cooked up at the restaurant next door. They can also get oysters to go. And then there's the discovery aspect of participation, where you are learning about all of these experiences, planning your own adventure, and then maybe coming back and doing another visit like this. So then we have product. And what I love most about these experiences are they are full sensory experience: sight, sound, taste, smell. Again, you're using all of your senses, and you quickly learn about the concept of miroir, which is that different places yield different tastes, which is a whole other reason to come back and go to multiple oyster farms on your itinerary. Many of these visitors say that as a result of the experience, Maine oysters or lobster is the best in the world, and you can't really beat that kind of marketing. All right, so people is another important aspect. Again, either having the opportunity to connect directly with a fisherman or an intermediary who brings you face-to-face with a fisherman. And it's that personal connection and those stories that you remember. You also remember those nuggets of information, whether it's oysters filtering the water or that oysters are hermaphrodites, which I was surprised to learn on my very first oyster farm tour. And then there's the social part that happens when you enjoy this with your family and friends. And finally, we have the last P, which is place. This is what I remember the most. Again, the place names, whether it's Casco Bay or that the Damariscotta River is the Napa Valley of oysters. You've got the landscape and the scenery itself. And then some working waterfronts offer the opportunity to linger a little bit longer and watch the rhythm of the day unfold, or they might have a raw bar that, again, you're enjoying that experience with your family and friends. All right, so why does any of this matter? Well, business leaders might recognize this slide as the brand equity pyramid, which demonstrates how consumers make decisions about what to buy. So at the first stage, you have brand awareness through marketing. At the second stage of the funnel, consumers learn about the attributes of a particular brand. At the third stage, they might consider, well, how do I connect with this brand in terms of my self-identity and my values? And then, at the top of the pyramid, we have consumer loyalty, which is really the there. Now, consumer loyalty also means all of the things on the left-hand side of the equation, like satisfaction, trust, and recommending to family and friends. But most people think of consumer loyalty as repeat purchase behavior, which is buying the same thing over and over again. So Professor Richard Oliver defines it in a very interesting way. According to him, ultimate loyalty. To achieve ultimate loyalty, brands must cultivate the consumer who fervently desires to rebuy a product or service and will have no other, pursuing this quest against all odds and at all costs. All right, so what does that translate into? Well, I would argue that, again, it's those aquatourism experiences that are helping to generate that emotional attachment to a product, to Maine seafood. And that emotional attachment also translates into a willingness to pay a premium. And how much is that premium? That is another thing that we measured through a different project. We surveyed 1,000 US consumers through the Maine brand study, about half of whom had never been to Maine and half of whom had been to Maine. And so for all of them, seafood, lobster, and fishing was the top imagery that they reported when we asked them to describe the Maine brand. And that really has a halo effect on many products and services. For those who had never visited Maine, they were willing to pay 18% more for Maine products. Now that number could have been negative. I can tell you the Made in Italy numbers are between 10 and 30%, so 18% is really good. So for those who have visited Maine, that premium is even higher. It's 24%. And again, a really important number, especially when you think about the premium for local food. So one more interesting finding from that study, and then I'm going to wrap up, and that was that there was no statistical correlation between the value of the premium and the number of visits that people made. And what that means is that even one visit can translate into that 100% premium. Even one visit can be magical. So that's a summary of aquatourism, which I believe is a powerful experiential marketing strategy to transform both residents and visitors into lifelong consumers of local food. Thank you.